Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, a regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq market site, we have Dr. John Mitchell, President and CEO of the Global Electronics Association, Paul Breitenbach, Founder and CEO of R4 Technologies, and joining us remotely, we have Ian Tien, CEO of Mattermost. We're here to discuss reshaping the electronics industry in real time and key initiatives around workforce sustainability and next-gen technologies. It is great to have all of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. And John, when we think about the electronics industry, this is beyond just the tech. This is geopolitics, trade, policy. It impacts every industry.
Every single one. So as you think about electronics, there isn't an industry that you can think of, whether it's aerospace, automotive, AI, every single one of these industries relies on electronics. And the Global Electronics Association represents all the various subsectors, from the brands that you think about to whether it's semiconductor, assembly, boards, harnesses, materials, equipment, all of that. And so we represent about 3,200 companies around the world.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting, we were talking off camera before, Paul, about Moore's Law and how it's just evolving so rapidly and trying to wrap our heads around what AI means. I think that's, central to this as well.
Yeah, exactly. Moore's Law in the old world felt really fast, every 6 months, a year, doubling. And the Moore's Law of AI is hours and days. And it is just improving at that rate and speed. And so between software and applications, really large, plus hardware to be able to deliver, this is where the future is.
Yeah, and Ian, I think it's also critical to point out that when it comes to these emerging technologies and how the surfaces are expanding as we look to emerging technologies and the cloud as an example, cybersecurity is truly one of the cornerstones here.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about national competition, we're talking about supply chain and we're talking about cyber. So the ability to be resilient, which is the essence of national security, is about how do I secure my digital operations, as well as how do I secure my supply chain so I can actually work and do AI and do all the things that are vital to a society functioning.
Yeah, I mean, it really is critical, John, because this is a national security issue as well. I mean, when you think about critical infrastructure and the implication that this has for industry and policymakers, how are you working with them to understand what this transition is going to look like?
Yeah, it's really a challenge right now, especially with all the trade and tariffs challenges going out there, because we really are a global industry. There is no one country that has the capability to build everything within their borders. I don't care whether it's the US or China or wherever you look around the world. So there really needs to be strategic interdependence to make sure that that supply chain is resilient, and that is really the challenge that we've been facing all the time, but especially more heightened with all of the changes happening.
Yeah, and Ian, that goes back to your point in terms of the vendors that you're choosing, supply chain and so forth. I mean, we experienced this during COVID when there was a lapse there, and there were delays, there were price increases and so forth, and broadening that out sometimes should be a consideration versus just onshoring or friendshoring, because we just don't have all those resources.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really your trade policy is now your national security and resilience policy. What are the critical agreements that you need to come to with your allies so that you have a complete supply chain? I think semiconductors is a great example of that with ASML and Taiwan Semiconductor and all the different sort of design components that are in the US. So there's supply chain for semiconductors. There's all the different players internationally and to secure agreements so that the system continues to flow. As was said earlier, no one controls all the supply chain.
Yeah, the
Right.
whole ecosystem.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, Paul, human intervention, it's not going away just because AI is part of the vernacular now.
100%. Yeah, at R4, we're in the predictive supply, predictive logistics, see ahead, thinking outside the LLM in making predictions. But in all cases, it is about human-guided decisions faster, human guiding the machine. And this is where I think the explosion of benefit, whether it's in supply chain or in talent or in medical and whatnot, it's about driving an improved outcome. Imagine if all the outcomes that you could ever possibly wish for could just happen automatically. And this is the new big frontier.
But I also think it's important for industry and policymakers to understand that AI doesn't equal LLMs, that it's much bigger than that.
Yeah, LLMs are amazing, but there's a whole world outside of it between what we do in predictive decision intelligence, and it's just beginning. And there will be derivative combinations of all these different technologies, just like you saw in the internet era, right? Where things got machinated around over and over and over the last couple decades.
Does this feel 2000-ish in a way?
It does a little bit in that there are so many AI providers right now, and 100 every day I feel like are popping up all over the place with their little niches, and many of them doing really good things, but I think you'll see probably sooner than I expect, there'll be some consolidation around the real value providers as they go forward in terms of who is the best at each of the different areas.
Yeah, and Ian, I think part of that too is recognizing the problem to solve and not coming up with solutions where a problem doesn't exist. I think we have to be smart when it comes to emerging technologies in that respect.
Yeah, 100%. I think AI and quantum and some of these new technologies that are going to shape the future are really, there's a lot of different components. I think, Jill, you mentioned, does this feel like the early 2000s? What the internet brought was massive change, lots of efficiency, but it also brought a lot of cyber threat. Now, any device is connected to any other device. That is a pathway for being compromised, for cyber attacks. And similarly for AI, as it becomes more pervasive, the sort of security, trust, and compliance layer, some people say is going to be even larger than the LLM market. Some people say it's even going to be 3/4 of the security, trust, and compliance as I take the sort of fundamental LLM and have to wrap security around it, kind of like the cyber industry today around the internet.
Which is interesting because we were talking about this off camera before, where cyber compliance is a competitive advantage. In today's market, you're just not going to have business or counterparties if you are not thinking with a cyber first mindset.
100%.
Yeah.
Just to build on that, the problem with AI is that we have no frameworks to secure it. So AI is about synthesized information. It's about knowledge management. We can have information controls, we have information security, but we don't have anything about knowledge. So when you can synthesize this information, all the guardrails, none of the guardrails work today. So there has to be a whole new mathematics around synthetic knowledge and then how to secure and manage it.
It's almost like we're playing 4D chess, right? To an extent.
Sure.
I mean, the policy can only keep up so much.
Yeah, but I think every single country or region, they have to have these kinds of policies in place. Right. It's not just security policy, but it's also, I like to think about kind of the core products, the fundamentals. So you have water for life, you've got energy to power things, and then electronics makes all of the other innovation that we're doing in every single industry possible. So if you don't have the right policies in a given country that are thinking about what is my electronics policy, what is my cybersecurity policy, you're going to be lost no matter whatever your key industry is in each of your countries.
Yeah, it's got to be challenging operating.
I kind of think this notion, policies are really important, but outcomes are more, right? The thing that in the beginning of the internet, when we were at Priceline, the problem is the tendency to push stuff onto it, which it really kills stuff. And our adversaries are not thinking that way. So I think the big shift here with AI is it can be controlled. It can be configured to drive very specific outcomes. It can be the good thing. There are lots of doomsdayers on AI, right. But this is about the new generation golden age. I believe in the whole idea of making the world better. And it's all by knowing the problem and the outcome you're trying to drive. Mm-hmm. And the policy part, if we're not careful, will get in the way right. of letting it happen.
Well, you don't want to stifle innovation, and I think it's also a good thing that the administration is focused on sandboxes where you can, test these things out without being regulated by enforcement. So I think we're thinking about that more smart.
Yeah, we do a lot in defense, and it couldn't be more exciting to try to help the government do more with less, right? To install innovation, because this is what creates deterrence. This is what creates optimizations. This is what creates happiness. So this is, I think, policy-wise, the right idea. Encourage it, get out of its way, and let innovation occur rather than feel the need to over-choke it at the beginning. And that's a bigger risk because our adversaries are not in that same regulatory environment.
Yeah, and John, to me, I'm hearing public-private partnerships and the role of academia and R&D as well. It's not going to be one or the other provides these solutions.
Maybe.
Okay.
I haven't seen that model work really well yet. So I think that you do need public-private partnerships for sure, just because the capitalization requirements to really make these investments is very, very challenging. And so if we're putting in place policies that are going to restrict or inhibit the development of electronics that are making AI possible, that are making all of these things possible, that's a losing proposition. And so we need to be thinking about the implications of that as policies are being made or as investments are being made, because they're not insignificant. And So thinking about more than the chips and things like the CHIPS Act were fantastic. However, just the chips alone is insufficient. You really need to think about the entire ecosystem in order to deliver a system so that you can actually achieve those outcomes that you're talking about.
So Ian, do we have the workforce, the properly skilled workforce to be able to execute on this?
I'd say not yet. The scale of demand is really going to stretch, all the know-how here, especially in manufacturing, especially in automation. So what needs to happen is the industry has to build very quickly, and there's a lot of very smart people that come in essentially for on-the-job training. If you get the industry here and you have the demand, you have the manufacturing, the skills will follow. But it's not, we don't have it out of the box. Our education systems, there's no education systems that's going to educate people on the frontiers of AI en masse. This is not undergraduate studies. So I think you've got a lot of great researchers, but you've got to bring in the industry knowledge, and that has to happen hands-on.
Why is quantum computing? Sounds like, I
Well,
mean, we were talking about this before.
Yeah, you want to go on workforce, well, I'll
Yeah, I just want to talk about that too. I actually feel like we're in the golden age now with new AI, the kind of stuff we're helping bring to the market. You don't have to understand the math. You don't have to understand the quantum.
Right.
You don't have to understand that. People come out really skilled at subject matter expertise. They know the problems. That's to me the part where, imagine a world 5 years from now where it all just magically happens. In the olden days, it took 100 people to create a website. Now we can do it at lunch with our iPhones.
Yeah.
So imagine that with AI now, where it's all about understanding the problem. So I think there's a really great reason to be optimistic. You need less mathematicians in terms of building new AI and people who understand how to use it.
Right. I will argue, though, the academic side is incredibly important as well. We need people such as your folks doing the research.
It is, for sure, 100%. You do need it at certain levels, but you also need the technicians.
Right.
And you need the engineers as well to actually develop the products that are going to power these things. And right now, in literally every country, you don't have the workforce that you need in terms of building the electronics, designing the electronics as you go forward. So there is a strong need there because it's frankly a lot easier for me to choose a business track than it is to choose an engineering track, and the pay is about the same.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it from the EV perspective, there's only a handful of electric mechanics that are qualified to work on these cars, so you can engineer and design the coolest product out there, but if your front line can't service them at scale, that's a challenge.
But you also have to take into account that the world is changing.
Right.
You know, things are going to be automated, so don't think that your normal hands-on jobs are going to be the same anymore. Your jobs now are going to be becoming, how do I manage the robots or the machines that are actually doing that manual work and programming and leveraging AI so that they are operating smarter.
Yeah.
It's all about experience. At the end of the day, the cars are all going to be commodities, right? At the end of the day, they're going to all have the basic same technology. So what makes you buy one car versus the other? What is the new experience? To me, that's the problem that the entire ecosystem can normally participate in.
I love the car example. How many people in the I mean, there's obviously people that love cars, but most people aren't buying it to, what's your horsepower in your car? Can you tell me?
Most
I have
people
no
don't
idea.
care.
Nobody cares. They want to know what my car does. Does it transport me? Is it reliable? But no, it's really about, does it connect with my stuff?
Yeah. Can I relate?
So speaking of connection, Ian, by the way, I would argue that data is the commodity.
Yeah, that is an incredibly part of the AI models, which is, what is the information and IP that comes in and trains, because that input, like what are the inputs to AI? It's about like information, it's about energy, it's about what's the class of models, but you're 100% right. That data and that availability is absolutely critical. And you can see around the world, there's sovereignty around data access. And in Europe, they're starting to build up, these databases and models, because a lot of that data is sovereign in some countries and organizations and sort of cordoned off. So that is another supply chain. Input.
And that's why I brought up the policy and framework part before. If you want to operate in certain countries, the EU is a perfect example, right? When you think about GDPR, if you want access to that data, there are frameworks that you have to follow, regardless if the US has it in place or not. And when you think about it from the business model perspective and needing that data as the commodity, makes you think about policy from a different perspective.
Yeah, there's 100%. The data privacy and sort of AI innovation and IP laws and rights, all that is part of your national infrastructure. So your resilience, your ability to create these frontier models is going to have a regulatory bottleneck. And I think that was brought up in the US with the AI action plan, and realizing some of these bottlenecks around over-regulation of the data, or not even over-regulation. What's the appropriate level of regulation? and what is the appropriate enforcement of copyright and IP laws. So you're 100%, that is a critical input that has to be right.
Well, it makes you wonder, will this type of technology help us to develop that framework? I mean,
100%.
I mean,
this is all going to shake itself out. Just like when they were trying to figure out where do you charge sales tax for internet sales back when I was in the internet business, right? I think the big idea is all about technology, AI, breaking down the silos. There is a bigger risk in not actually projecting forward than there is about not being able to solve the regulatory governance issues. Those things are going to sort themselves out. And I think what we're talking about is exactly right. Enough. Just enough to keep it so that it's secure and whatnot. The big idea is how do you combine all the data in a way that allows you to achieve the breakthrough, competitive advantage, whether it's commercial or in national security or even in the civilian and state governments, where how to do more with less. It's all siloed. We have to bring it together. And we have to do it in a way that we can trust and create an outcome that all makes the world better.
I feel like, John, these conversations always come back to operating in silos. Do you think in aggregate that the electronics industry is prepared for the next iteration of what it looks like?
Well, absolutely, because the electronics industry is already dispersed across the globe. It doesn't exist just in one place. We don't have a specific center of excellence that is, for the most part, exclusionary to one country or another. So, and that actually works very well for us because you have that, I mentioned before, strategic interdependence. You need to make, if you have a COVID, if you have a war, if you have a whatever happens there, you need to make sure you have enough partners so that you can reach either across a border or across an ocean to continue that supply of goods that you need to make all of this future possible.
And this is why sustainability in terms of the products and models lasting, not sustainability from the environmental perspective, which there is an element of that as well, but sustainable and flexible enough so that this infrastructure and technology can evolve as the human race does.
Yes, and that's where some of these challenges that we've seen with trades and tariffs recently has been a challenge because people have had to pause. They're not making the same investments that they are as quickly as they had planned because they're trying to figure out how to keep their businesses surviving, and they're constantly having to play chess with, you mentioned 4D chess, trying to figure out where I need to be maneuvering my supply chain around to keep the business flowing so that I can invest in these innovative ideas, so I can invest in sustainability as I go forward.
Yeah, and this is where, Paul, I agree with you that these technologies will allow this to happen
100%.
At some point. I mean, this iteration had to happen anyway.
100%. And there's always going to be shucks and jives in the market and whatnot. I think the whole idea now is accessibility and helping organizations, government, commercial, access new technologies and AI at an enterprise scale so that they can be more competitive. Because as you're more competitive, they generate revenues, they generate profits, the government generates deterrence. This is the golden age. And so the thing to take away is now is the time. It is just at the beginning of the next 5 to 10 years. It will be just like the internet was over decades, hasn't gone away. This is now where we are. It is the time to jump in.
And Ian, final thoughts here as we wrap up. In aggregate, would you say the cyber and defense tech industries are prepared or on their way there?
The cyber defense is gotta catch up to these new technologies, to phishing, to impersonation, to it's quantum. So there's work in progress, but like overall, just to be really open, like the digital infrastructure in a lot of critical vital services pretty fragile. And there's a lot of folks working on the problem, but it's a very large problem. Ultimately, the question is who funds it? Is it the customer? Is it the vendor? Or is it the government? All these cyber problems can be solved. It's not in a fantastic state today, if you ask anyone in cyber, but it needs to improve, and it is a strategic priority for many governments.
Yep, and we'll tackle those problems in October with Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Appreciate all of your insights. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.